Military gear isn't cheap. Even a single RS-28 Sarmat or Trident II missile can cost hundreds of millions. When a country's military throws down that kind of cash, they'll squeeze every ounce of use out of it. But nothing lasts forever. Sooner or later, even the high-tech gets benched, left to rust, rot, or vanish into the background. When that moment hits, military gear gets dumped and ditched just like anything else, and honestly, you'd be surprised where some of it shows up. So, join us as we take a look at the 15 most abandoned incredible military finds around the Earth. Number 15. Buried Iraqi fighter jets. Back in 2003, when the US and UK invaded Iraq, they expected serious resistance from the country's air force. Instead, they found silence. Iraq's jets never took to the skies, and now we know why. Hidden in the desert near the Al-Taqadum airfield was an entire buried fleet of Cold War-era jets, including MiG-25 interceptors and Su-25 attack aircraft. It turns out the Iraqi military, knowing they were outmatched, buried their planes in a last-ditch effort to preserve them for future use. But it didn't work. The desert did what war couldn't ruin them. Sand filled every crevice, damaging engines, controls, and fuselages beyond repair. By the time coalition forces uncovered the stash, the jets were rusting shells, not machines of war. The fleet was meant to be hidden for a comeback that never came. Today, they're reminders of a military that collapsed under pressure and a war strategy built on hope and desperation instead of strength. Number 14. German bunker. Hidden in Roman fort. In 2021, during a dig on Alderney in the English Channel, archaeologists found something they weren't expecting: a World War II German bunker built directly inside the remains of a Roman fort. The site, known as the Nunnery, had stood since the 4th century. When German forces occupied the island in 1940, they quickly saw the strategic advantage of its thick, 10-foot-high stone walls. Rather than start from scratch, they adapted what was already there, reinforcing and expanding the ancient structure into a 3-story bunker system. Today, what remains is an eerie mashup of Roman stonework and Nazi concrete, ancient defense blended with modern warfare. Some of the Roman masonry took damage during the conversion, but large portions of the original fort still stand, including the old tower gate. It's a surreal contrast, one site holding 2 different legacies of empire and war, 1,600 years apart. What was once built to defend against ancient invaders now carries scars from the deadliest conflict of the 20th century. Number 13. Civil War cannonballs at Folly Beach. When Hurricane Dorian slammed into South Carolina in 2019, it did more than uproot trees, flood homes, and make people's lives hell. It exposed history. At Folly Beach, the storm pulled back enough sand to reveal a pair of Civil War-era cannonballs buried beneath the surface. One was a hefty 8-inch shell, the other smaller with a 3-inch diameter. The area had once been thick with Union troops. In 1863, the beach was a key staging ground for attacks on Fort Sumter. While no actual battles took place on the sand itself, Union forces had artillery stations all along the shoreline. These cannonballs were likely leftovers, unused during training drills, or simply forgotten during the hasty withdrawal at the end of the war. Their reappearance wasn't planned, but it was a reminder of how history doesn't always stay buried. The beach has long since turned into a tourist destination, but now, thanks to a storm's raw force, it's briefly stepped back into 19th century wartime America. No excavation team required, just Mother Nature. Number 12. H.L. Hunley submarine. In 1864, the Confederacy launched the H.L. Hunley, America's first combat submarine, off the coast of Charleston. It was a 40-foot, 7-ton steel vessel designed for stealth and precision. The Hunley successfully completed its mission, sinking the Union ship USS Housatonic. But it never made it back to shore. For more than a century, the sub's fate remained a mystery. Then, in 1995, researchers finally located the wreck. A decade later, the vessel was raised and examined in detail. What they found explained everything. The Hunley didn't use torpedoes. It carried a spar-mounted explosive at the front. That weapon had to be physically rammed into the enemy ship to detonate. But the spar wasn't long enough. When the explosive went off, the shock wave damaged the submarine itself, sinking it along with its entire crew. What was intended to be a game-changing weapon ended in a tragic self-destruction. Today, the restored sub sits in a preservation lab, a symbol of both technological progress and its brutal learning curve. Number 11. Nazi Arctic Base. In July 2020, a team of researchers confirmed something that was long brushed off as myth: a Nazi base near the North Pole. The abandoned outpost, located on Alexandra Land in the Arctic, was called Schatzgräber in German. This means treasure hunter, and it dates back to 1943, before Gwen was born. It was likely used as part of a wider network of Arctic weather stations meant to help German commanders predict northern European weather patterns for military planning. Inside the frozen ruins, the team found German Navy gear, rifles, machine gun rounds, landmines, and even meteorological textbooks. The most bizarre find: a worn-out copy of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain sitting among the military clutter. Researchers believe the station was evacuated in 1944 when its occupants fled via U-boat. What's chilling is how well preserved the place was, like the crew just stepped out and never came back. It's a frozen time capsule of Nazi ambition, built far from any battlefield but still playing a role in Hitler's war machine. Number 10. Madness Tank. If you've ever followed British pop from the 80s and 90s, you probably know Madness and their frontman, Graham "Suggs" McPherson. But in May 2017, the singer wasn't headlining a show. He was out in Dorking, Surrey, digging up history. With a team of archaeologists, he helped unearth a World War II-era Canadian Covenanter tank that had been buried under a vineyard. These tanks were used during training drills when the Canadian Army was stationed in the region from 1940 to 1944. By 1943, they were pulled from active duty because their armor couldn't stand up to advancing German tank designs. When Canadian troops wrapped up training and headed home, they buried the outdated tanks instead of scrapping or shipping them. Over time, the machines were forgotten, quite literally buried under the vines. When the tank was finally pulled from the soil, it raised questions, like whether the grapes growing above had a hint of oil and iron in the wine all those years. Well, what do you think about it? Let us know. Number 9. Barracuda Plane Wreck Recovery. When engineers were surveying the seabed near Portsmouth in 2018, they weren't hunting history, just minding their business, but they found it anyway. Lying beneath the waves was a Fairey Barracuda torpedo bomber, lost during a training flight in 1943. The three-seater aircraft had vanished shortly after takeoff from Lyon-le-Solent and hadn't been seen since. The wreck wasn't raised until 2019, just in time for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Extracting the plane intact was a long process, taking over a year of planning. Once lifted, it turned out to be the only surviving Barracuda recovered in one piece. Even the original design blueprints no longer exist, so the aircraft is now a crucial reference for restoration teams. Engineers have already begun using its structure to develop replica models for air shows. Eventually, the plane itself will be restored and displayed in a museum. For decades, it sat untouched on the ocean floor. Now it's the last of its kind, pulled back from silence to preserve a forgotten part of aviation history. Number 8. Zone Rouge. After more than a century, parts of northeastern France are still too toxic for human life. The Zone Rouge, translated as Red Zone, is a haunting reminder of World War I's lasting scars. Located around Fleury-Devant-Douaumont, the land was once a battlefield so relentlessly shelled that even now arsenic and other chemicals saturate the soil. Plants won't grow. Animals don't return. It's not just the toxins. Millions of unexploded shells still lie buried beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed by time or accident. Originally, the Red Zone spanned 460 square miles, covering entire villages that have since become ghost towns. Some cleanup has taken place over the years, especially during annual iron harvests when farmers and demoners collect leftover munitions. But progress is slow. A 2014 estimate suggested it could take another 300 years to fully restore the land. For now, it remains closed off, untouched by development, and frozen in time, one of the last places on Earth where World War I still refuses to end. Number 7. Fort Carroll. Fort Carroll sits stranded in the Patapsco River like a memory no one wants to deal with. Built in 1848 and completed in 1850, this artificial island fortress was named after James Carroll, one of the men who signed the U.S. Declaration of Independence. Though designed to house 225 cannons, the fort never fully reached its intended firepower. By the time the Civil War broke out, only a handful of gun platforms had been installed. It was briefly active during that conflict, and again in 1898 during the Spanish-American War, but it never saw combat. By the 1920s, the structure was deemed obsolete, serving briefly as a firing range during World War II. In 1958, a private developer purchased the island with grand ideas for redevelopment. Those plans didn't pan out, and the fort was left to rot. Now it's a crumbling shell overtaken by nature. Seabirds have taken over the battlements, marine life swims in the flooded interior, and Fort Carroll slowly disintegrates in plain sight. Number 6. The Stug 5 tank recovery. Well, that's why we say, always double-check when going somewhere. In winter 1945, German troops retreating from Poznan, Poland, left behind more than just wreckage. One of their Stug 5 tank destroyers sank into a riverbed and disappeared for nearly half a century. The vehicle had gotten stuck during the chaos of withdrawal, and with no way to recover it under fire, the crew abandoned it to the mud. For years it was little more than a rumor, until a team of local history buffs finally tracked it down. In 2006, they managed to extract the turret. 2 years later, they pulled the entire tank. Restoration began immediately in Poznan, and despite the decades of water damage, the vehicle was brought back to life. By 2012, the Stug 5 was running again with minimal parts replaced. Out of the few surviving models worldwide, it's the only one fully operational. You wouldn't guess from the restored frame that it had once been buried, forgotten, and corroding in silence, yet today, it rumbles like it never left the battlefield. Number 5. Live World War II explosives. Well, this one is super terrifying. In August 2010, archaeologists digging at a site in Lower Saxony, Germany, hoped to find Roman artifacts. After some here and there digging, what they got instead was a live reminder of 20th century warfare, fully armed World War II explosives. Initially thrilled at uncovering a hand grenade and an anti-tank charge, that excitement vanished the moment they realized the munitions were still live. The bomb squad had to be called in to safely detonate them. Sadly, this isn't a one-off situation. Germany is still full of hidden wartime explosives. During World War II, the Allies dropped over 22 million tons of ordnance across the country, and a chunk of it never went off. Today, every new highway, construction site, or renovation project comes with a risk of uncovering one of these sleeping hazards. These relics aren't rare, they're part of the country's haunted soil, and they still have the power to kill. Unearthing them isn't just archaeology, it's a matter of public safety, and sometimes survival. Number 4. Teufelsberg, listening station. Teufelsberg, or Devil's Mountain, is one of Berlin's stranger Cold War leftovers. Built atop a 240-foot man-made hill of World War II rubble, this eerie place once hosted an American NSA listening post. During the Cold War, the hill gave the U.S. a strategic advantage, perfect for intercepting communications from Soviet-controlled East Berlin. The massive white radar domes were part of a broader surveillance network, rumored to be tied to Project Echelon. In a creative twist, the Americans even constructed a Ferris wheel nearby, ostensibly for the German-American festival, but in reality, it doubled as a signal amplifier. After Germany reunified in 1990, the base was abandoned. Over the years, it's become a canvas for graffiti artists and thrill-seeking explorers. While rumors persist about a Nazi military college buried beneath the mound, nothing definitive has been confirmed. Today, it's still there waiting for the next war. Number 3. Liberator Crash. There's a Liberator bomber lying in pieces on ATK Island, Alaska, where it crashed in December 1942. It wasn't a combat hit, just a bad weather mission gone worse. Brigadier General William E. Lind was flying reconnaissance when a storm hit, and the plane couldn't reach an airstrip in time. He brought it down in a field, cracked his collarbone, and survived. The aircraft didn't. Once the damage was assessed, they decided it wasn't worth the effort to recover. No hangars, no repairs, just leave it there. That's exactly what happened. The remains are still out there, torn up and rusting, half swallowed by the landscape. This isn't a war memorial. No one's guarding it. No tours, just metal fading into moss. Of the 8 B-24D Liberators left in the world, this wreck barely counts, but it's real. It's not behind glass. It's what's left after the uniforms go home. What was once a flying tank is now a collapsed relic in the middle of nowhere, untouched and mostly forgotten. And it also reminds us that always ready for the end. Number 2. Wolf Sit's Lair. Hidden deep in Poland's Masurian forest lies the Wolf's Lair, Adolf Hitler's most heavily fortified Eastern Front headquarters. Built in 1941, the complex was chosen for its remote location, far from civilian eyes. For over 2 years, Hitler ran much of his military strategy from this site. It was also here in July 1944 that Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg tried to assassinate him using a suitcase bomb. The explosive detonated, injuring several people, but Hitler survived with only minor wounds, thanks to the bomb being moved just moments before the meeting. Paranoia took over after that. Hitler ordered the site abandoned and rigged with explosives before fleeing. What's left today is a moss-covered ruin, fractured by TNT and reclaimed by trees. Most of the concrete bunkers still stand, hollowed out and cracked, haunting reminders of both Nazi ambition and failure. Although the bomb didn't change history that day, the attempt did fracture the illusion of Hitler's invincibility, and the wreckage of Wolf's Lair still bears the tension of that moment. Number 1. Battle of Tar Bluff Site found. A Revolutionary War battlefield, hidden for centuries, was identified in August 2020 near Tar Bluff, South Carolina. This was the site where John Laurens, a key figure in America's fight for independence, lost his life in 1782. Laurens, known for both his bravery and recklessness, served closely alongside George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette. Locating the battlefield wasn't easy. The land is now a quail hunting preserve, and the team had to complete their survey before the season reopened. Armed with hand-drawn 18th century maps and ground-penetrating radar, archaeologists scanned the area and struck solid evidence: musket balls, grape shot, a howitzer fragment, and even a bayonet. These scattered remnants painted a clear picture of conflict. One cluster of artifacts may even mark the very spot Laurens fell, just 30 feet from where researchers believe the final push happened. With the South Carolina Battlefield Preservation Trust now involved, the location has earned recognition, ensuring it won't be forgotten under the plow again. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.